So I just want to say a massive thank you to the following people. Not only have they been literally instrumental in making the podcast become what it is and being the ongoing guests for becoming a bow hunter, they are the salt of the earth of within the bow hunting community, and incredible people in general. But the massive thank you from me goes to them directly because they are the ones who helped piece together this whole piece you're about to hear about within the podcast. It's the bow and the gift that these guys created for me, which I'm absolutely blown away by and just so in love with the bow that they've got for me. So if you're not already following them, make sure you go across and follow these guys. They are the ones, like I said, that I've interviewed from the start of the podcast that have literally made the podcast what it is. So here's the list. Ian Summers, Kev Schilf, Brad Murphy, Aidan Doomstis, James Doomstis, Jono Roberts, Alyssa Roseman, Lonnie Brockman, Shane Chader, Adam Kavanagh, Monty Nixon, Mitch Warren, Luke Cameron, Ben Solaris, Dylan Smith, Emily Corbett, Jack Pogson, Cody McKay. Might be Mackay. No, it's McKay. Sorry, dude, if I fucked it. Brett Meldrum, Camden Forey, Matty Moore, Pete Conradi, Corey Simonsbergen, Jack Crick, Robbie Kroger, Cam Rand, Benny Fensom, Corey Bartlett, Shazda Brown, Harry Stenton, Ross O'Mara, Holly Boone, Corey Stenhouse, Kellen Stenhouse, Jace Ritchie, Luke Griffin, Aaron Whitaker, Isaac Daly, Shrek from Noobs Bureau, Sean Lynch from Dog and Gun and the Dog and Gun crew, and Hayden Raluski, which is an interesting one. Hayden Raluski. I don't know if I stuffed your last name. Sorry, bro. But Hayden just reached out and said that he wanted to be involved with it. A massive thank you also goes out to Toby Nichols, Liam Woods, and Steve Kelly, because you guys all had a massive part to do with this on the back end. And Rob Morris, who not only put in money for the gift, but also created this incredible hanger for the bow. It's a place where I can put my bow and hold it. He's put his own tusks from a boar that he hunted, just this awesome piece of woodcraft that he has created, and then glued the hooks on, and that's literally where I rest my bow. It's so sick. But on top of this, I also just want to say, like, the biggest thank you to Jack Spinks for organising the bow, for getting the pretty much getting the whole setup organised for me. Grant Rand for being the absolute instrument behind getting this organised. The conductor of the orchestra he kind of prepared it and put in all the effort to make it all happen. And Adam Barter for coming up with the idea and kind of hustling the crew to make it all happen. But yeah, from the bottom of my heart, guys, thank you so much. This week's episode is brought to you by the crew at Dog and Gun Coffee. During this rut, Dog and Gun has been a staple that's gone with me everywhere. I would take my jet boil up the hill, and after a hard morning hunting, I would get the old jet boil out. I would boil up some water, and I would pour it over their preloaded drip filters. I would jump and change between the Samba blend and the full send brew, and each morning, even if the hunting was horrible or things didn't go to plan, what I had to always look forward to was my Dog and Gun coffee. And you too can enjoy great coffee ready for your next adventure and every adventure that you go on. And you can also get a discount when you use the code Bowhunter. That's Bowhunter in all caps locks, and it will get you $10 off your next order at Dog and Gun Coffee. This week's episode is brought to you by legends over at Kayuga Broadheads. And man, oh man, have I been seeing some damage done by the Kayugas this rut. In particular, the wounds that I've been seeing from the Trizot, their latest release, have been so impressive for a 3-blade broadhead. What it does and the wound channel that it opens up, the blood trails that it leaves is absolutely incredible. And I think if you haven't already been seeing them, you're going to have a trail of great testimonials coming out after this year's rut, because I've seen many stories, I've seen many posts about people sharing their experiences with the new Trizot and how much they have absolutely loved them, shooting them through critters, and then even be able to reuse the broadhead straight away without having to change the blades, despite it having changeable blades. So pretty incredible. The wound channels that it does is, it literally is lethal, and hence why we're seeing some incredible bucks and stags going down this rut. So you guys can get yourself a 10% discount when you use the code BAB10. That's BAB10 in caps locks, and that will get you 10% off of your next order at Kayuga Broadheads.
Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bowhunter. I'm your host, Matty, and join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands. Searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bow hunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bow hunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world, bow hunting.
Legends, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Becoming a Bow Hunter. Over the next 3 weeks, you've got some action-packed things coming your way. Pretty much, I went on my pre-rut hunt down at Grant's Block. We had a crew, an awesome crew there. It was where the crew also gifted me the bow, and we hung out, and we pretty much just had an incredibly fun time, and we forgot to podcast. We didn't get to podcasting. We were too busy hunting and having fun. Anyway, what I did was a little recap on my drive home of that hunt. I also then did a recap of my recent red rut hunt as well. And then I've also got the great Donnie Vincent coming on. So this week you have the pre-rut recap, which is the hunt that I did down at Grant's Block. Next week we're releasing the red rut recap. And then a week after that, so 2 weeks from this episode, you will then have Mr. Donnie Vincent in your ears as well. So 3 cool episodes coming your way. Pretty much I'm releasing the pre-rut and the red rut hunt back to back because it's just me talking. There is some cool adventures. There's some great stories that I'm going to share with you guys. Some really cool insights that I learned that I took away from both the pre-rut and the red rut hunts that I went on, but pretty much I just wanted to get back to the guests really and make sure that you guys are getting some great content. So this week you've got the pre-rut, which you're about to hear. Next week is my red rut hunt, and then the following week you'll have Mr. Donnie Vincent. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, let's see how this sounds. Hopefully this goes good. You'll be hearing it if it did go good. What a crack of a weekend. I mean, honestly, every time you go hunting, I think is a time when you get to refresh, get to top up your own cup. And as frustrating as the weekend plays out in the sense of the animals not doing what you want them to do, or the wind not doing what you want it to do, the cows always getting in the way, the kangaroos doing the thing. No matter how frustrating it can get at times, it's still such a pleasurable thing to go and do. And I think more so, the more frustrating it is, the more you want to go back and do it again, the more you want to tick it off and make sure that it gets done. But I think realistically, hunting any time is always an incredible thing to go and do, especially when you get to share camp with great friends, and you get a good old bunch of belly laughs happening, and yeah, it's next level. It really is such a incredible thing to do. And this weekend I got to witness it where we had kids in camp too. We had Corey's son and Benny's son in camp, and just to see the excitement in them and passing what we have down to the next generation is just absolutely incredible. So to give a bit of a recap in general, I went down to Grant's Block this weekend. Always incredibly grateful to that dude and all he does for the community and all he's done for me. I'll actually probably put it at the start of this podcast because there's a list of names I want to rattle off where they've all, pretty much a lot of the past guests who have been on the podcast over the last 5 years got together and said, hey, we should do something nice for Matty and buy him a bow. It's something he's been talking about for so long. And all these guys and the girls have got together and chucked in some money and bought me this absolutely incredible stalker stick bow. a longbow. It's 60 pounder, 28 inch. It's beautiful. Like the artwork, I think of a bow like that as being a piece of artwork, and the wood and stuff in it, the colours in it, it's absolutely beyond beautiful. They've put a few freaking incredible little parts in it, like they've chucked my logo in it. On the arrow rest behind the fur, there is the little question of how big's your horn. So if you've been listening to the body for quite a while, you'll understand that. There was a reference to a joke that was made when I was interviewing Jack, and that was a question that Randy had asked him, and it's kind of been an ongoing joke since then. But to be honest, I called Adam because it was Adam's idea. Adam Barter said to Grant, man, we should try and do this. And Grant orchestrated it and asked everyone, and they literally put it together in a night. It was just absolutely, I'm beyond words. I'm speechless. But I called Adam, and I couldn't help but break down. Like I just cried because of the gratitude, and really, I almost cried so many times in the night when the guys gave it to me. I had no idea that any of this was coming. They gave me this mic. It's a little plaque. It's a microphone on a plaque, like you'd find a trophy, and the handle of the microphone is a big girthy doodle with some veins all through it. I got that, and I was blown away by that. The fact that they'd even thought of, they were celebrating the fact that I'd been doing this for 5 years, and I was beyond words with that. And then we just kept talking. We just kept having a great night. Liam Woods came into camp, so we had Ben Stacey, we had Cam Rand, we had Grant Rand, we had Corey Samensberger. I can't remember what his last name is, but there's a few extra words to it. Corey, everyone knows Corey. He's a fucking big giant bear. And Benny Fensom was in camp, and then obviously Corey's and Benny's sons. And so we were just there, we were all catching up on how the hunt had gone, that we'd all just been on, and we're eating dinner and just having a laugh and hanging out. And then Grant told me that he'd got a new bow. It was one that he had made up for himself. I was like, oh, that's odd. Like, he'd told me interest in having his recurve and stuff before. He's got a recurve, I know that, and he put in some time and effort into it, but there was a lot of frustration. And there's a part with your stick bows where you got to put in a lot of time and in practice, I guess. And he was like, I knew I didn't have the time to put into that, so I didn't really. He's like, it's something I will do eventually. He's kind of similar sort of concept to what I had said, but he's like, for right now, it's not a thing. So when he said, I got this new bow mount up, I was like, what? What did you get a bow mount up? Like, it's just like, oh, that's strange. And then they were like, what's it say on it? And I had a look, and that's when I saw the logo on it, and I was just like, no way, you guys are crazy. Like, just for them to be giving me that, I was, absolutely blown away. So I'll read out the list of people at the start of that. The start of this body, you will have heard all those names, and I'm just beyond grateful. Like I said, it literally brought me to tears. I'm almost crying about it now, just thinking about it. It makes me emotional. I think, obviously, I know you guys listen. I know there's a lot of appreciation for what I do, but you just forget about it. Like, I get into my routine. It's just every fortnight I know I've got a podcast coming, and I know I've got to book in my dates and my times and whatever, and it's always a jumble. It's not like I book it at the same time every single week, because not everyone's schedule works out that way. And if I'm ever doing calls in America, I'm often hopping up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to make them happen. And then the Australian ones, like, the other side that you need to remember is that the guests are also doing the same thing. They're always jumping around to try to suit my timetable and try and suit the space to give up their knowledge and their stories. And I think, in general, if you're a listener, I would highly encourage you to reach out to the guests as well and thank them when you hear some stuff that is highly beneficial or highly informational for you, that you're like, wow, this is going to change how I think, or this does change how I think about hunting. It really is one of those things that, once again, they're not getting paid for it. They're just giving up their time. They're volunteering their time to come and do it. So, put in your effort as well. And like, give them a thanks and say thanks to show your gratitude is what I'm trying to say. Because I know they really, really appreciate it as well. Like, I really appreciate it. I get these messages a lot, and it really does kind of, it's the heart of the podcast. It's what keeps it going. It's the soul that keeps it moving forward. So,
if you guys have reached out before, thank you very much. If you do reach out to the guests, I also appreciate that so much because they obviously make the podcast happen. It's their time and effort that they put in is what makes the podcast a reality. And then I'm just the conductor of it all, obviously. But so that whole thing is mind blowing to me. It's going to be something that hangs on my wall for the rest of my life. Not actually, like I'm going to shoot it like crazy, but I mean, that's a trophy in itself to me. That's something that I'll honestly cherish for the rest of my days. So I'm absolutely blown away by that. Let's talk about some hunting. I'm a bit disappointed that we didn't get to make a podcast happen. At the same time, you need to realize that we had 2 days in camp and there was so many moving parts and things that had to happen that just made it not really a viable option. By the time I'd been given the bow on Friday night, there was a lot of drinks flowing, the stories were flowing, the laughs were flowing. There's a lot of R18 stuff that probably should not be included in the podcast. So we decided not to bring the microphones out and just enjoy each other's company. And that's definitely, I mean, that's one of the best things about going into camp with friends, right? Some of these blokes, I see them once a year, and it's just so nice to be able to catch up and literally leave off from where we were and just have such good times. And so in that situation, it was like, not that the podcast would ruin it at all, but it wasn't the right time to be able to push it. And we were already at maybe 12 o'clock by this time. Because you remember you're hunting till pretty much 8 or 9 o'clock of a night time. By the time you get home, it's 9 o'clock. And by the time you cook up dinner, 10 o'clock if you're lucky. If there's any butchering or anything like that to be done, that all has to all happen as well. So it's always a lengthy process, and we don't really sleep much in deer camp because the drinks are flowing, the laughs are happening as well. And you're up early. We had a nap in the middle of the day, so that also restricts how much space you've got in the middle of the day to be able to do anything. We helped clean up camp because it hadn't been touched for 3 months. So there's lots of these little things that happen, and I'm very, that stuff in my head all comes first. The podcast is always second, because realistically I feel gifted enough to be able to go to these blocks and hang out there. So that's always, I always want to show my appreciation and give back as much as I can first. And really, if you can adopt that mentality, you'll keep blocks for longer. You'll be invited back. So that in itself, an important thing. But pretty much Grant and I, we both had to leave Sunday morning. So we knew we weren't going to get to hunt it all on Sunday. So we wanted to try to get there early enough on Thursday afternoon so we could have a quick hunt. And I think I got there about 3:30 and I hadn't really shot my bow heap, so I started shooting it and making sure the broadheads were tuned and shooting well. And Grant pulled into camp at about maybe 5:30, I think it was. And we had a quick catch up while he was getting changed. We're unloading his ute and stuff. And then we looked at the time, it was like 6:10 or something. We're like, oh geez, we got to get going. So we quickly ran up just the back of his little block. And we were just going to start our hunt. And this is the same hunt that I actually did with Benny Fensom last year. It was like the most incredible day where we literally, every new gully, every new valley we went to was just a new pig, a new deer, a new goat or whatever. Like we had an absolute blast. And so we're literally driving up and these 2 pigs walked out right where I shot the very first pig on that day when I was walking with Benny Fensom. And I told Graham, like, that's exactly where I shot a pig last year. And he goes, oh, it must be a good omen. We started driving. We were just going to do a little bit of diesel stalking to start with because we were so short on time. And we got up a little bit higher and I said, oh, there's deer down that gully. And he goes, all right, I guess it's time to hop out. And he looks and he goes, no, there's pigs down there. I said, there must be both down there then. And so we started trekking down and sure enough, there was this big lump of a boar, big black and white guy. And there was a sow on heat down there. So we get some squealing and stuff pretty much as soon as we hop out of the car, which is always exciting. And he goes, well, we can shoot a pig first before we shoot a buck if you want. Get the can't remember what he called it, but yeah, get it off your back essentially. Like, make sure you're shooting well. I'm like, that sounds great to me. So we walked down to this little gully and they busted through this fence line and were out in the long grass, and it was pretty darn windy, like blowing a good gale at this stage. And Grant started rushing ahead, like he was walking down. I could kind of see where they were in the paddock, and it looked like they were going to tuck back towards the fence. So he's gone down to the fence pole to jump over, And I've walked straight over to the fence line in case they were going to come to me. He looks back, he's like, what are you doing? And I just kind of gave him like the flicker head, like go over, like see if you can get up on it. And the cool thing was Grant was shooting his original bow, which has been passed around to heaps of different people. He's brought it back out to try and get himself a buck with it this year, which I think is really cool. It's like this bow that's been, he started with it and I think it's gifted to maybe 3 or 4 different people to use now, and they've all started their bow hunting journeys with that, shot many critters with it, and then bought their own bows as they kind of got into it. And so he's gone over, and it started coming towards me, and then it turned and just went pretty much straight towards Grant. Like he walked maybe 25 meters out into the paddock, maybe 30, and it walked straight down to him. This other pig came over to me instead. He shot this boar. It's run all of 50 meters and piled up in this long grass, and it was just so cool to kind of see it go 360 with that bow, where it's he's gifted it out to so many people that they've all kind of come into bow hunting. And then he's been able to bring it back and shoot this cracker of a boar. We could see it was a lump. We weren't really sure how big he was or anything like that. So he shot that, and then this other pig that started beelining towards me, it just kept coming. And so I had a shot and knocked it over literally just as where it was standing. It just knocked over, and I'm always so blown away. This time I decided to go for the pilot cuts with the bleeder blades. I'm always so blown away with how much blood they actually just drop everywhere. And it was funny because the long grass with Grant's boar, we were like, should we blood trail? I'm like, no, it's just over here. And so we ran over, and we couldn't find it because the grass was so long. We started coming back, and I was like, well, let's go back and blood trail it. We'll definitely see where all the blood is. He was actually using the Trizot. And we came back, and as we were going back to find the blood trails when we found the boar, so we didn't have to. But I've been on Grant's block 3 times now, and he shot maybe only one boar with me while I've been there, and the boar got away. It was an unfortunate sequence where he shot it right where he should have, and this boar just got away. It happens apparently a lot with these big old suckers, and it was just so cool to open the hunt off with that, with Grant knocking over this boar, and I found it first. I just had the biggest smile on my face as Grant was coming over, because I knew what his reaction was going to be. And he comes over and sees it, he's like, yeah! And we just do a big old high five and cuddle. It was just like the perfect way to start this hunt off. And he's like, oh man, I feel bad, that should have been your boar. I'm like, no way, that was 100% yours. Like, it played out the way it was meant to. And so we got some quick photos, because it was a cracker. And then there's like I think it was the first animal he'd shot this year, which is just, such a sick way to open the year up. And then we're like, well, let's go find a buck. So we start walking up the hill. And as we're walking up the hill, sure enough, we see this other tank of a boar coming down the hill. He's going off to try to find this sow, obviously. And so he's walked down, he pretty much crossed over this little road where we were just about to walk up, and he's just, he'd come over, gone under the fence, and we were in like this pretty long, strawy type grass. So every step you take was a bit of a crack and a fair bit of noise. So I was trying to go slow, but I had to move a fair bit to get to where he was. And anyway, he's crossed over it. He's come into one part and stopped. Kind of thought maybe he saw something, and just that's odd, and then kept going. And as he kept going, he gave me a clear shot, probably 18 meters. So we've just pulled him up and made a bit of noise, and as if we were chewing pig. He stopped and had a look, and I smacked him. And when I first hit, it sounded like a pop. It was like, and I was like, oh no, like thinking I'd gut shot this pig. I was like, this is horrible. I was like, what a start to the hunt. I'm like that. I looked at Grant and I said, I think I shot a bit back. And he's like, oh, I don't know, man. He's like, I got it on film. So he tried to have a quick look, and he's like, go up and have a check of your blood. So I went straight up, and there was just blood everywhere. I was like, oh no, we're good. He goes, hold up, are you using bleeders? I'm like, yeah, look at this. And we saw the blood trails, like, there it is. Like, that's what he was looking for, the big sprays, essentially. And so I literally punched this guy through the heart. The smack was the sound of the fighting pad getting punctured. And so he's kind of run over this little ridge that we're on. And so he's gone all of probably 40 metres. It's just that the 20 metres we could see was this side of the ridge. As soon as we got to the top of the other ridge where we're following his blood trail, he's literally 20 metres down the hill, just piled up. And so my boy was a big old boy. Well, he's on the way back down, so his spine's sticking out, and just starting to lose loose shaped, so not as big bodied, not even as big head. Like, he had a big head, but not as big a head, it seemed. Just because Grant's was like this lump of a boar, but just both big toothy suckers. You look at mine, well, when you look at the two pictures, they look pretty comparable in a sense. But everyone who saw them, it was like, man, Matty's going to pull so good. Like, he had big, thick bases and stuff, and we ended up boiling them out, and Grant's actually scored better, which is awesome. So I think mine was 25, and Grant's went 25 and 2/8 or something like that, which I was, absolutely pumped for. So that's how we started our hunt, and then there was actually a few does that came out right on the last light, and we got up and just couldn't make it happen. At last light, I actually took a shot and just completely missed. It actually happened on last light. That happened three times to me, which is bizarre. So complete misses. I don't know what happened. To be honest, like, this one should have been a complete pinwheel. 20 metres. They were slightly downhill, like over the curve of the ridge. And just every time these fallow were onto us and they ducked, and it just shows like how springy these little bastards are. But we pretty much, we went into going into the next day. We went into a part where one of the local cockies had been hunting quite a lot, and it was quiet. There was nothing happening. He'd been doing a lot of rattling, and we think a fair bit of blind rattling. Just having a drink of my coffee. He'd been doing quite a bit of blind rattling and calling and stuff over the last few days, so everything was a bit quiet. And we were in there for a little bit, and then we knew this was happening. One of the local national parks, forests, whatever it is, they were having a culling day, and this chopper flew over at a certain time of the morning, and it just kind of made everything go real quiet, like even more so. We were seeing a fair few does out and stuff, but we saw a few spikies, and that was kind of it. And so that morning we walked around a lot. We were pretty much, to be honest, we were hunting scrapes. We were trying to find the scrapes more so than we were trying to find the deer, because we knew if we could find the active scrapes, the somewhat active scrapes, we'd be able to hopefully find the bucks. And there was only one really super active scrape. The rest of them were not that active. Like, they'd started to play around them a little bit, but we pretty much discovered pretty quickly that we were probably 3 to 5 days earlier than we should have been. We should have probably, if we left it 3 to 5 more days, the fallow in general would have been more reactive. They would have been kind of the more aggressive style that you see most fallow being, because we were calling every day, we were rattling every day, and to be honest, barely anything moved an inch for us where we were. And there's some interesting facts that I'll get to about that. But first I want to talk about the helicopter shooting, because they were flying all over the national park, and you could hear it from the distance. They used a semi-automatic, and literally we would have heard 500 shots going off, and all of us in camp, we all just, like, some of the boys, like, man, it gave me anxiety. I honestly felt like a bit physically sick, just like physically ill just listening to it. They're up in the helicopter, and you hear pop, 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 like 10 rounds just unloading like that. Then it's quiet for a second, then the reload, pop, 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 pop. And it's just really, it's hectic to think that is the management system that the Greens want, that RSPCA want, that all of these whatever you want to call them, institutions, politicians, whatever, that are fighting against the act of bow hunting, and they're going out and saying that this is the best method of it. And I can't remember who was saying it. I think it was at Grant's block potentially. They found a pig that had its snout shot off, like pretty much his mouth had been shot off from the top, from the helicopter, and it got away. And it's a very, I mean, obviously a gun is an effective method, but I don't know if that's the most effective method of it. This aerial shooting, the poisoning, I don't know. Like, we are seen as the bad guys in the open eyes of these institutions or whatever, the politicians. They're demonizing us so they can use this method that is honestly, yes, it's effective at times, but there's also a lot of harm that gets done in that time, in the sense of animal cruelty type stuff. And us as bow hunters, like we care so much about the end outcome. We do have a lot of moral compass and ethics behind us, and no one ever wants to see an animal get injured. That's probably the least thing that we ever want to have happen. And realistically, seeing the animal die is something that we all probably question as well. Like, we're not out there just to go and kill things. There's so much more that comes with bow hunting. And it was just, it was interesting to see how much emotion it kind of sparked within camp throughout the boys in general. Everyone was a bit kind of taken back hearing 500 odd shots like that. And obviously, those shots, not every single one is probably hitting an animal. I wouldn't say they went and shot 500 animals, but I'd say probably multiple shots on one animal to potentially make it happen based on the speed at what those shots were going off at. I don't know, it was very interesting. But we actually saw so many deer. Like, Grant and I went up the back, we went further up the back that afternoon after the shooting had been happening, and we really weren't sure what we were going to see. We weren't sure if everyone was going to be tucked away and completely scared because they'd heard a helicopter and stuff going off, or if it was not going to be that way at all. It was a fair distance, right? It's not like it's right there, so it's a fair distance, so you're just hearing it. And sure enough, we kind of come out and there was does out. We started seeing them. We saw some spikies. We saw plenty of spikies all weekend. And then it was that afternoon that I heard my first croak, and my trip was made. Like, I mean, it was already made when I got there and shot that boar, and then my trip was made when all these bucks around me started croaking. We couldn't see any of them, but it was just, I don't know. There's just something about witnessing that in the wild. It's incredible. So yeah, it's beyond stoked. And it was crazy. We were passing up so many. Like, we were finding the does, and we're like, wherever the girls are, there's going to be boys somewhat close by. Let's just try and keep finding them. So we'd come to a mob of 10, 20 girls, and we would be within, like, at times 30 meters of them, at other times like 100 meters of them. And we're like, okay, well, like, it's usually you're 30 meters when you try and get around them, because it's like the only way you can go or whatever. And so it just kind of shows, like, what am I getting at? Essentially, like, we've built up our skills. Oh, I've built up my skills, I should say. Grant's definitely got the skills already, but it's cool to see how close you can get to these animals without them ever realizing that you're even there. Even when you're not hunting them, when you're just observing them and trying to find their husbands instead, their brothers and sons and whatever else instead. But yeah, so at times 30 meters just kind of ducking around, trying to get around the top of this hill, trying to find some bucks or anything like that. So we were on the edge of all of these does, probably 20, 30 does out in this field with a few little spikies, and Grant's like, heck, let's just shoot a little spiky. Like, let's get something to come in so you can get the monkey off your back and know you're shooting well. So when we find a big buck this weekend, it kind of all works out. And so we set up and he starts rattling. He does a few croaks, and they just didn't care. They're out in the field. They did not care at all. The spiky, the does, they're just sitting there like, yeah, whatever. Just a loud, aggressive male in the corner. And then he's like, heck, well, I'll try some doe calls. So he starts doing some mews, and all of a sudden that got the spiky's interest. He comes over, he's coming in. I've got this tree. I got a tree in front of me, so I could pretty much draw and shuffle to the side and take a shot with a little bit of a clear opening on the right-hand side of me. And so I'm looking through the clear opening, waiting for the spiky to come in, and then Grant's like, Matty. And I'm like, what? I look over at him, and he's like, there's a buck right here, like pointing next to him, and I can't see anything. There's trees in the way and stuff, and he's like, draw. So I draw back, and this buck walks out. I see it's just a young guy still. I see him, and he walks literally 18 meters and just walks in front of this dead fallen log where I cannot see any of his vitals. Like, it's blocking his vitals the whole way, and he gets into the part that's a clearing if I'm looking at the spiky, but versus where I was looking at him, it was just like thick little bushes, and essentially if I shot, there was going to be too much of a risk that it would hit a stick, bounce and hit him in the ass or something like that, and it just would not be a proper shot. It was not what I wanted. It's not a shot that you should take, essentially. And so I had to just sit and watch him walk by, and I'm like, I'll wait until he gets around the other side of the tree. But of course, by the time he got around the other side of the tree, that's when he actually caught my winds. Like, the winds were swirling all weekend. It was kind of the theme of the weekend. And so he ran off, the spiker ran off, and nothing got to happen. And this is kind of probably 10 minutes till last light. So we quickly made a play, maybe 20 minutes from last light. So we quickly made a play. We went over the hill and got to the other side. And then that's when that another little spiky, his little buttonhead, came up on the edge of this hill as we were walking over it. He was walking up. He kind of noticed that he was sitting there. I'm at full draw, and because it's so dark, it's hard to see. I had to like look out of my peep and then look back in to make sure I was on angles and stuff. Oh, sorry, on the critter where I wanted to be hitting. I took my shot, and that's when he ducked it, and it's gone just down the hill. We didn't hear anything. Like, we didn't hear my arrow crash off into the distance or anything. It was weird. So I reckon it's divoted straight into the ground and just lost it completely. But yeah, it was just an unfortunate event, essentially, with that one. Cool experience to see that buck. The interesting about that buck is he didn't make any noise. He was so quiet when he walked in. So the hind calling obviously got him interested, and he came up. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just coming up on top to see the scrapes and stuff that were in there, or see the girls that are in there. I don't actually know. But he walked within probably 10 metres of Grant. Grant's like, heck, I didn't do what I said you should always do of making sure you've got an arrow on the string when you're calling something in, because he had clear view of it for ages. Versus, yeah, I just had no views, which was unfortunate. And so the unfortunate part about this podcast right now is the fact that I'm missing out on all the boys' stories and the excitement that they got to go through, and that's it's upsetting to me because I love showcasing that stuff, like especially in camp when you've got the excitement of it all happening. That's only regret, but at the same time, obviously I've already explained why it didn't happen. But yeah, so the next morning we went out. We kind of went to a somewhat similar place, and it was alive. The hills were alive. We came in on many bucks. We did plenty of rattling and calling, and just nothing was coming to us. We were doing some calling at one point, and some boys got into a scuffle over the hill and far away where we could hear it, we couldn't see it. Another drink of coffee. Hear it, couldn't see it, and it was just like, it was not the hardcore extreme fighting that you can run in on. So we tried to make a play on these guys for ages, and just nothing came to fruition. And the winds kept swirling. No matter where we were, nothing was coming in. It was a bit frustrating. Anyway, eventually Grant and I were like, let's just sit down for 5 minutes. We'll sit on the side of this hill. We'll glass over the other side, because essentially we're in this valley. So we're on one side of the valley. We're glassing the other side of the valley, and we find this cracker boar in between all these other does and a few bucks and stuff. And it was just cool to kind of sit and watch it, and we were just chatting for a bit. And he goes, well, if you say the word, we can go and chase that pig. I'm like, let's go. Like, may as well. There's nothing else happening. There's plenty of happening around where we were, but the wind was not being our friend. And I was like, man, we've got everything we need over there. We may as well. And so we start going down the hill, and sure enough, there was actually this pikey just walked straight out into us, but probably 70 or 80 meters away. And we just ducked down and just did some calls. And it's just so cool to see how curious they are. As a creature, just looking at us and coming a bit closer and then walking away and not sure. And as we start walking down the hill, of course, this other chocolate buck comes straight up at us, kind of 30, probably 100 meters, but only 30 meters off of the edge where we were. So he comes out and sees us and runs off, and it's just like those little events kept happening. But we were walking down to the creek, and we saw this doe, and he's like, heck, we may as well try to get some meat for you, right? So we go into the creek, and as we get into the creek, like the wind was blowing hard across the mountains. Oh, heap of fallow in the little dam next to me. That's cool, little fallow farm right here. Oh man, they've actually got reds here too. This is a place near maybe Gyra or something. Oh, there's some big heads in that. That's impressive. Where was I? We're walking down into this creek where the fallow are, and as we literally get like close enough, not even super close to the edge, but we're probably 40 meters off of this doe, and as we get close enough to the edge, of course the wind just pulls us down into this gully, and they just run. And I could hear something in the bushes. I'm like, there's something still here. There's something just over here. I'm going to go have a look. So I started walking over and having a walk down. I'm like, must be a pig. and all of a sudden this big old hare runs out and takes off. And then there were pigs just down the creek from us, and the big old unique sow, big black and white girl, and I was like, should we not? I'm like, no, let's go up the hill and try to find these bucks and stuff. So we walk over and onto the other side, and sure enough, some croaking starts happening. So we try to get them come in. We start doing some croak, and we do a little call. Then they actually started in the creek kind of next to us, not the one we've just gone into, but where it kind of Y bends off. There were two fellows having a little fight, a little scuffle, and so I was like, quick, let's get ready. And pretty much, once again, the wind just it pulled back up the creek this time and blew straight into them. They kind of blew out. One of them definitely got scared, and then that made the rest of them on edge. By this stage, I think the wind was blowing back in our face again, and so pretty much there was just like there was something going on. They knew there was something going on, so they were just too aware. We're probably 60 metres off of them, the space they were walking through us. It just wasn't going to happen. So we let them all walk off, and across the face from where we are, there's all these spikies and stuff there. We're in on this edge of the country where it's really thick, where there'd be a lot of probably does and potentially bucks up in the hills. And we're like, heck, let's just try rattle here. So we started rattling. We were watching these spikies down from us, maybe 180 metres, and they were not budging at all. They just didn't care. We high and call, we were croaking, like Grant was putting on the whole show, and nothing interested these guys at all. There was just nothing to get them moving at all. And he's like, oh, well, I guess you better have a stalk on it then. So I started stalking over, did a great job. Like, got straight over to them pretty quickly, and I sit down, kneeling down, because there's this other bucks coming up the hill now. So I've got a spiky, and I've got two-year-old bucks plus maybe 3 or 4 girls there. So they're all still intermingling and hanging out. But I kneel down, I'm just watching them, and all of a sudden I hear this like a big breathe out, and I look to my right, and no over like 2 meters away under this bush is that boar that we had seen, the big old boar. And he breathed out, he opened his eyes, we made eye contact, and he just hops up and he sprints off, goes down the valley first, hits my wind, comes back up, does like a few zigzags up the hill around these deer and stuff, and then of course everything just takes off. I'm like, oh my God, just another flow on of what just kept happening all weekend with the wind, with the play out of events and things that just kept happening. I really got to witness the whole concept of more deer, more eyes is not necessarily a good thing at all, and can be very problematic at times. And so this next part where we pretty much we were starting to it's getting late in the day. We're like, okay, maybe it's time we call it quits. Maybe we start walking back to the car. We start walking along the ridge. We're like, may as well hunt this ridge while we're here. We'll hunt it back. And we literally, the next little bump in this ridge where we came over, there was the best fallow buck that we had seen all weekend, and he's there with 6 girls and just hanging out. And I'm like, heck, let's do this. Like the adrenaline's high, we're pumped again, we're ready to roll. And Grant put on probably the best show he had done yet. He was rattling, he was croaking, he was scratching the ground up, he was lifting his antlers up high enough so the deer down the hill could see it, and shaking them around and scruffing them up on the ground and stuff. And this thing, his joke was it was a poof. And Corey said, well, mate, if it was a poof, he probably would have come over for a poke. But he wasn't interested at all. At one point, these girls moved off of him, and they went down the hill. This is after probably half an hour of us mucking around trying to get this thing to come in. He took one step, and I was like, oh, like the excitement levels just went to 100, and then he stopped, and that was all he did. And then he turned off and went down the hill and went and hung out with his girls and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like, a buck like this is exactly what I wanted to get this weekend. Like a decent buck, good head. It was really just, yeah, that was my goal for the whole trip. And so all of his does and a few spikies and stuff that were around that little area, there was some in the valley just below him, and then there's some on the tops of the valley, and they just started bedding up. And I'm like, well, he's not going to go too far. We actually saw him duck off down the hill, and all of the does bend up on top. I said to Graham, like, heck, I'm going to give this a shot. Like, I'm going to try get in on them. But the way that the wind was blowing meant that I had to actually go all the way along the top of the hill where they could completely see me in clear view, just the fact that I had thick stuff behind me. So I was like, I can make it across the top of the hill, and then I need to make it all the way down the hill and do like this big old loop around them, essentially, to come back on them. So I start walking across this hill, and I'm just walking so slowly, and it didn't matter that the deer were looking at me up the hill at probably maybe 60 to 80 meters. Like, I had enough thick cover behind me. It was cloudy, so that I wasn't casting shadow or anything like that. That I was just taking like the smallest, minute little steps, and it didn't matter. They weren't seeing me, which is so good. So I was just taking it step by step, small, fast process and progress, walking across the top of this hill. And I was looking down, just constantly just trying to monitor them and make sure they weren't onto me. And I was looking down, I see these antlers in the back, and it's not the buck that I'd seen, the chocolate buck. It was another buck down the hill. I'm like, heck, if I can get these girls to move off without bumping him, that's perfect. So I started moving a little bit faster to get onto the right-hand side of them, hoping that if they saw me, they would go to the left. And sure enough, they spotted me. So I'm like, now I just need to make sure that they don't start barking at me. So I literally just started stepping down the hill, walking at them. And they didn't bark, they didn't do anything. It played out the perfect manner, the way it was meant to. They literally played the game and ran off to the left. So I'm walking down this hill, coming straight up to where this buck is, and he's over in the ledge now. He's got all these does with him. I couldn't see all of them to start with. I see two of them, and so I'm like, heck, if I can get down this. There was a little gap where the chocky buck had run to start with. And so I was like, I'm going to go down there anyway, and that's where this other guy was. And so I'm sitting at probably 60 meters off him. Like, all I need to do is get to this next, like, I pretty much had a fallen log next to me, and I had to just get to that tree, and I would have been at probably 35 from him. And I was like, that was something that I would feel pretty confident with. If I had a chance to sit and watch him and maybe even wait for him to come up closer, then even better. And so I started walking down, and sure enough, the wind just pulled straight into the gully, and probably at, let's say, 45 meters when it happened, and all these deer, there was probably 10 of them, they all busted out of where they were, poof, all run off and take off to the side of the hill. I'm like, oh, damn it. So I walked back up to Grant, and he had actually walked down, and I hadn't seen him. So we did a bit of a loop back and forth, and whistling and calling out to find each other, and that was pretty much the rest of our morning. So yeah, that was like, there was also a little bit, there was lots of little other things that happened throughout the hunt that was highly exciting. But that was kind of like the majority of the buck hunting that we did. What was interesting is we were at kind of the point of this gully, as deep into it as you could go. The other boys were maybe 5 kilometers down in the more open gully, and where they were hunting, the bucks were responding. They would come up to they would come into the rattling. They would come in to the croaking. I found that very interesting. Like, all the 5K can make the big difference, and I guess a big part of that is also that where they were, there was definitely more. There's like the crops down there, so I don't quite fully remember what Grant's and Corey's theory is, but essentially they think that they go down and they get really fat on those crops and stuff before they start to make their way back up to the point, because during the rut, their point is that part where it's like absolutely happening. And so because we were hearing croaks and stuff down there, we're like, well, surely there's going to be some down here that are willing to go, but it just didn't seem to be the way, versus the boys, Corey and Benny, hunted all weekend with their sons, and that's just awesome in itself and so cute, like the stories that they had to tell. But they kept rattling bucks in off of the same spot. They would go back to the same spot and multiple times rattled different bucks in, and series of events. I think Benny covered it in the podcast we did when we were hunting in the creek of the fallow coming in. He definitely did, actually. So the last night when we were all hunting, the boys went back up and did the exact same thing. It was funny because they said to the boys, like to their sons, they go, do you want to go hunting? They're like, nah. They were just too busy playing with their Tonka trucks. They were so stoked. And they're like, no, come on, boys. That's what we're here for. You get to play with your Tonka trucks no matter where we are. We don't get to hunt deer. And the boys like, no, we just want to play with our trucks. It was just like typical boy stuff. And then when the boys talked to their sons individually, they were both so excited to go hunting. They're like, it was just because each other was saying, yeah, nah, they were in agreement that was what they should be doing. So they went up to this same hillside scrape and stuff that they'd been on, and they rattled in this young buck, and it came right into 8 meters, and Benny punched it through the frontal shot, punched it through on a slight quartering away angle, I'd say, just based on where he was shooting from, and he hits it in through the chest, pumps out through the rib cage, and as soon as the arrow disappeared into it, the sons, the boys just, yeah, like screaming at the top of their heads, just, they knew it had happened. There was big blood spray and stuff, and everyone was just so pumped. Like, it would have just been such a wholesome moment to be a part of, and really, it didn't matter the size of the buck, the size of the animal, what animal it was even, like, just having that moment where that was exactly what they wanted the boys there to see that you could call in a deer, to witness the experience, and seeing it all unfold. Like, they all came back to camp, and they were just, the spirits were so high. Like, it lifted everyone up in camp so much. It was just so cute to see, so awesome to see. And I think that's the cool part of what you can do too if you've got kids, right? Like, having them come into camp and witnessing that. Sure, it requires a bit more patience, a bit more hurdles to get through and whatever else, but it was just such a wholesome experience that I know the boys will remember it for the rest of their lives. I mean, all of us will remember it for the rest of their lives, and we weren't even there to witness it. We just heard all the stories about it. It was just so cool. So yeah, they came back and they hung him up. They're like, "Oh man, we knew you wanted some meat," so they gave me so much meat. It was incredible. So yeah, to be honest, this weekend has just been so good. I could have not shot anything, I still would have been absolutely pumped. We could have not shot anything in the whole camp, and I still would have been pumped. Just getting to hang out with friends and have a good hunt is always amazing. And then, of course, the bow and the trophy and stuff on top, like, just so blown away with all of that stuff. And on top of that, Benny's like, well, me and Benny went for a hunt, which you guys will hear the podcast on that. I've got these little wireless mics that we can take out, and so hopefully the audio is good enough that this all works out. But because of my new bow, I was like, man, we got to blood it, we got to get it out. So he's like, man, let's go out with the spotty tonight. So we went out with his head torch and his thermal. Having the thermal is a game changer. It really is, and it just makes for so much fun. And so we were coming up on this pig last night. And we had to get through this fence, and we ended up going over the fence instead. So we've both hopped over the fence, and I've already got an arrow nock because this pig is not far off of the fence line. And we both hop over the fence, and Benny goes, as we hopped over, I'm standing completely still holding my bow. And this is a big lesson in general. I was holding my bow in not the best position. Benny hops over and says, "Oh mate, watch that broadhead." I didn't actually hear him say that, and I'm standing completely still. He turns away and with excitement turns back, and as he turns back, the freaking broadhead punches him in the triceps, the back of his arm. It punches through his tricep, and he realizes straight away what's happened and pulls away. And he's like, "Oh man, oh!" I'm like, "What's happened? What happened?" Like, I didn't even feel it because I'm holding my longbow, 60 pounds, so that pressure on the string just didn't do anything, essentially, and it's punched straight into his arm. He's like, "Fuck, he just stabbed me." And the way he kind of bent over, I honestly thought I'd punched him in the lung. I'm like, "Oh shit, this has just turned to absolute crappy. Like, this is going to be a very interesting night all of a sudden." He's like, "It's gone in my arm, bro." I'm like, "Oh no, like thank the Lord that's where it got him." But also, oh no, like, okay, this is a big lesson. Like, doesn't matter how close the pig is, how close the animal is, making sure that you put your arrow in the quiver before you jump back through the fence, or put the bow down completely, whatever it is. The other side of it is having the awareness of where your arrow is constantly pointing. That was something on my behalf that was probably a bit shit, or definitely a bit shit, because of how it played out. I'd like to point out that Benny actually influenced it himself. He would laugh at that, where he turned away. He saw the broadhead, he turned away and punched it back through himself anyway. But at the same point, if I was not facing the direction of where he was, none of this would have happened. So I say it because the funny Corey's like, "This is something you don't say." I'm like, "No, this is exactly what you got to tell, because this is this is where we learn from these little mistakes, right?" I had my neck, my buff on, and I tore it off. I said, "Bro, take your shirt." He just took his shirt off, because we're trying to see the cut, and you can see a bit of blood coming through on his shirt already. I'm like, get it off, we'll tie it up. So I got my buff, and we tied it around his neck. Around his arm, just to cut the blood from happening straight away. We had a look, and sure enough, like it's pretty wide, the cut. Like I would say probably 3/4 of a zot went into his arm. Pretty chaotic to think that just that slight slip of going through a fence and what can happen there, and how wrong that could have actually gone versus what did happen. We were very fortunate, I guess, in the long run. And it just also shows, like, I didn't touch that zot up at all. It was just razor sharp from the packet, and it was literally a turn and bump. It wasn't a fast-paced arrow or anything, and it zipped into him, which is crazy. So they're razor sharp, and unfortunately Benny got to witness it first. So my first blood of the new bow was on Benny Fensom, the fox fingerer himself. And I felt so bad. I'm like, dude, should we call it? And he's like, no, bro, we got to get you a pig. And sure enough, this pig, it hadn't even caught on. These 2 pigs were probably 50 metres away from us, if even. And he's like, come on, let's go get it. Let's make it all worthwhile. So we get across. And there was 2 young boars, and one bigger, one smaller. The bigger one was pretty onto us pretty quick. Like the light situation is that you walk in with your head torch on them, and you still have to do all the same things you would with the pig if it's aware of you, right? Like, it's not just you marching in on it. You still have to stalk in, but they can't see you at all because of the light blaring on them. They only see the shadows of stuff that your light is casting, which can also be problematic in itself. But at the same time, with what we were doing, we were walking straight up, and it was the noise of the grass and stuff that were cracking through the straw grass and whatever that was cracking on the way up to getting to this boar that was the problem. That made him aware of us. So we kept getting closer and closer, and we'd have to stop and wait and just watch his reactions and whatever. And eventually he started just to mosey off. He knew something wasn't right, and he just started to walk off the little white and black boar, bigger white and black boar. But the other one was just onto too good a feed. He was just digging in deep and getting into the bulbs of the thistle. And so we've gone up, and we ended up getting to 8 metres, and lined him up and shot him, and sure enough, it punched a little bit high, but it did the job and got this little boar on the ground. It was kind of nice to go full circle with getting the bow on the Friday night and being able to blood it on the Saturday night. It was just, it was nice to christen it so soon. And it's cool. We got a few videos and pictures and stuff, and then we pretty much found another few pigs, and we went after them. I actually shot under the others, and we went a bit longer in distance. I shot under them. Line was good. The shot was not. Benny's torch was playing up, and he goes, usually what I do is he's got a spotlight torch and head torch, so you go really wide as you're walking on them, and as you get to them nice and close, you zero in on it by you go like a spotlight on it, and it brings out the distance a lot better. Because even at 8 metres, that thing felt like it was almost 12 or 15 metres. Then we got an 18 metre one that was too aware of us, and the grass was too long. He's like, what do you think? You reckon you have a shot? I'm like, yeah, I'll have a crack. And I shot it, and it was, once again, perfect line, but it went straight under him. And that looked like it was a 30-metre shot, but because you're instinctively shooting, essentially, with the longbow, I honestly thought I was going to pinwheel him, but it just, once again, just didn't happen. Perfect line, just low. And he's like, if you had the spotlight part of the torch on, you'd probably be able to know that distance a bit better. I said it's probably just beginner shooting, to be honest. The fact I haven't shot that bow heaps yet. It's going to start happening. But anyway, so we got back to camp. Probably, this is 1 o'clock in the morning or something, 12:30 last night. Like, we'd already had a big old day. We'd butchered up his deer. We'd had dinner all together and stuff, and we were contemplating doing a podcast, but we still hadn't butchered. It was, I think, 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night or something. Grant had to leave last night in the end. And so it didn't work out where we got to the podcast, hence why you've got it happening like this instead. So not as fascinating as when the other guys get to talk, but you get to do it with my voice. Anyway, we got back to camp. We cleaned up. Well, he had a quick shower, then we cleaned up his wound. It's really important that you do have first aid kits in camp, right? Like, something so simple, so silly can happen and cause some big issues. Everyone in camp, I think, has their own first aids in their cars. plus there was one in camp. So we pulled out Benny's one that he had in his car, and we were able to just put some spray on it, poor dude, put some alcohol spray on it just to clean it all up, and put a patch on it, and then just taped it up to make sure that it it'd stay clean and it wouldn't leak or anything like that. So I feel horrible. I honestly do. I feel so bad about that. I said to him, at least you've got something to remember me by for the rest of your days, mate. You have a nice little scar from Matty from becoming a bow hunter. So yeah, hopefully that's a little quick reminder of, like, obviously I think most people are pretty aware when they're with firearms and whatever else, like that gun safety is so important, but you forget often about how sharp a broadhead is and how close you are. And Cam was actually saying that Cam and Grant were walking along one day together, and Cam had his arrow already knocked because they were doing a stalk in, and he got a little bit too close to Grant, and Grant was walking just with his hands brushing backwards and forwards, and on the back brush he smacked his finger on the broadhead and just cut his finger completely open. So it is just a reminder, like, make sure you know where your arrows are pointing, make sure you're not standing too close to each other when you are doing that stalk. I'm not saying you don't have to, like, don't do those stalks, because sometimes that's some of the best hunting you get to do, right, where you're kind of single file stalking in on something. But there's the element of, like, safety you do really need to think about, where your bow is, where it's pointing, if you've got an arrow out, especially if you're going through a fence. And I mean, Benny was even somewhat aware of where that damn arrow was, and it still happened. So yeah, just a reminder. It's safety first where possible. Well, it should be always, but yeah. Anyway, end of the day, in regards to this hunt, I did not get to shoot a buck. I had the best weekend anyway. It makes me just more hungry to get onto more fallow at some point in my life. I know it's going to be a thing that I get to come back and hunt bucks with Grant, and I'm absolutely pumped for that. Or hopefully, he has actually put an invite to come out later next year and actually do my rut there, which I might definitely take him up on. And depending on how this year goes, I've got a date with Destiny with old Frank the Tank Ho for this year. If not Frank, then old Cecil. My 6x6 last year, he was also a very good head. And now that I've got my longbow, my goal has always been to go back after I've done some stuff with my compound bow, to go back and start using a trad bow to knock over a red deer was the goal. But if I can get one of the big boys over quickly enough, we'll never know how that happens. Quickly is never a thing in bow hunting. If it comes together at all, that I can get it happening with my compound bow, I will spend the next however long I've got spending the time with my longbow to try get anything with it. I'll be absolutely stoked, even if it was a spiky or something like that. I'd be thrilled. Maybe not a spiky, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what numbers are around first. But yeah, anyway, end of the day, I'm excited for what's to come. I think if you haven't already, go back and listen to Graham Cahill's podcast. It's reminded me of, like, remember the frothiness that you get from going out hunting, how exciting it is. He's right, being in camp with your friends, like, you got to cherish those moments. They are so special, and you're making memories for the rest of your lives. And I'm completely full because I literally have just come away from that. I've come away from a weekend where I've just had an absolute blast, had consistent belly laughs just all weekend. We had the hardships that we've gone through together, and we're coming out the other end and trying to figure out how to make it all happen next time. So it's exciting stuff, and I think that's really what bow hunting is about. It's what's I don't know. It's what gets me excited about it. And I've got this hunt coming up, which is actually a solo hunt chasing reds. And don't get me wrong, I'm very excited for that. I'm very excited to make it happen. But also I'm like, oh, it'd be so sick to have a camp like that to be going into for the reds. Like, that would make it a different game. Anyway, I think I'm just rambling now. I'm about to stop in where am I going? Inverell. I'm going to Inverell. I'm going to meet up with Colin from Outlaw Bows. He makes these sick stick bows. He's got a mixture of all different types of bows. We've been chatting for a fair while, so I'm about to go in and meet up with him. We're going to have some lunch together on my way through. Give me a chance to stop and stretch my legs out. There's a fair drive, about 10 9.5 hour drive or so to get from my house to where we're hunting. So it's nice to break up a day like that with a little chat and some more talk about bow hunting and frothiness. So anyway, legends, I'm going to bail out. I think this is probably gone for maybe an hour or so. It was a quick recap. Once again, I'm sorry I didn't get all the boys on. It's a regret because I didn't get to obviously showcase those guys and those the knowledge that you learn in that camp every single time is just absolutely incredible, and that's what I'm sorry for, the fact I didn't get to showcase that. I'm not sorry with how the weekend played out and the fact that I didn't get to actually record because it couldn't have happened essentially with the way it played out, and that's just the lay of what it is. You don't want to necessarily it's not ruining a camp, but you don't want to change the dynamic too much by forcing people to have a podcast. I've had this happen many times running a camp with many people, and there's so many more things that have to happen, and that's completely fine. It kind of takes priority, like I was saying before. So anyway, I hope you're well. Hope your rut's going incredible. I hope you're getting some bucks down, some stags down. I hope it's all coming together. I hope you're at least seeing them and having fun. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. Having some belly laughs, having some fun, making some memories. And once again, anyone who is included in getting me this 5-year gift, I am beyond stoked. I had a proper cry before just out of gratitude. I'm just blown away. So thank you again. I can't say it enough, and I'll be saying that for the rest of my life. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to everyone who listens. You're appreciated too. You help this podcast keep going. You help when you buy stuff from the sponsors. That really helps the podcast. It helps those brands. They're Australian brands. They're doing incredible jobs. That's where you guys can show your appreciation, supporting the brands that support the podcast, that realistically keep me as consistent as what I have been with the podcast for the last 2 years. Like when the sponsorship came on, that's where I was like, well, this now needs to be a consistent piece. I cannot miss anything, to the extent where I'll honestly, if I need a podcast for Saturday, I'll be recording something on Friday night. It's happened twice now. I recorded something on the Friday night, edited it up and had it ready, even if it took me till 1 a.m. in the morning to get it out for 4 a.m. on the Saturday morning. Like, that is my deadline that I have every single week, and it doesn't matter, every single fortnight, sorry. To me, that's my standard of what I'm going to keep and what I'll stay consistent with, and because of that, like, I have the integrity around it where I'm going to make it happen. Come hell or high water, or an individual podcast like this where you just hear me ramble. But hopefully it's insightful. I'm just trying to think of some of the lessons that I learned this weekend. And I think in the long run, like hunting scrapes, finding out where your scrapes are going to be for the year, making sure you find consistent scrapes in this early part. So for reference, later dates has been the 21st through to the 23rd has been our hunting days. 24th maybe. But it was a little bit too early for that block in parts of it. But at the same time, if you've got a big enough block, make sure you see every angle of the block if you can. Like we saw, like I said, 5K's difference was all it took for bucks to be active on a rattle versus 5K up the hill where they were not. And so it just kind of proves things will happen at different times on different parts of your block. Get to know your block well enough during the rut and start documenting it as well, because now Grant knows, okay, well, probably not until the 27th through 30th or something like that is a better time to start if you're going to do some form of pre-rut hunting, because that's when they're going to be more active in that end part of the block where the big numbers and stuff are. He actually just kept saying to me all weekend, the numbers are not here yet. He's like, I don't know if it's because of what they've just done in the national parks and that's what's caused this, or if it's the fact that it's just too early. He's like, I'm guessing it's because it's too early because we're still seeing plenty of deer by the end of our trip. So yeah, interesting stuff. I think there's so much patience needed when you're doing calling and rattling and whatever else as well. Like the boys, Benny and Corey taking their boys out, their goal was to sit in the one spot and they would just rattle and call. Like they'd find the bucks, obviously. They'd wait for them. They were sitting down and waiting for them because Benny had a bad back, Corey had a bad knee, so they were both broken and they're having to hike their boys around on their shoulders. So it makes it extra tough on top of that. So they're like, we're going to sit and try to find them on a hill where we know we can see them. And sure enough, they'd spot them, then they'd start to do their calls and they'd wait and see if they can get the reaction. versus if you're blind rattling, like you really have no idea where anything's going to come from. So to me, after listening to the podcast with Grant and Toby, it made me go, well, blind rattling doesn't make sense to me at all in that, like for where we were hunting and what Grant had told me. Obviously, if you know they're there, they're croaking or anything like that, go for it, go for gold. But in this situation of what Grant and I had, blind rattling didn't make sense until we did come across a scrape. We couldn't see them, and we did it. We're like, look, we don't know they're here, but it's worth a blind rattle because the scrape was it was like the most used scrape that we kind of saw. And so we had seen deer higher up the hill, probably 200 meters from where we were, and we're like, well, the goal is hopefully some of them come down, if not something closer. But that was about all the blind rattling that we did. Everything else was wait until we saw them or could hear them just over the rise, and that's when we would start to try call them in. So, yeah, I'm just trying to think about the extra learnings. I think this is something that I've always been guilty of, is don't rush the end process. Like, it's never over until it's over. For me, I'm always like, we need to get the job done. Like, at the very end of it is when the pressure starts to build up, right? And where you're like, for me, I'm always like, it's almost like it's coming to that crescendo. It's all building up and it starts to get that little bit chaotic. And I'm like, quick, it has to happen. Quick. And I think the quick part is what needs to be removed from it. It doesn't need to be quick, because the more, big old roadkill, just missed it. So the more calm you can be in that end stage, probably the more likely it's all going to happen. Yeah. I don't know. Hopefully that resonates with some people. Anyway, my throat's getting sore. I'm talking too much. I'm going to drink the rest of my coffee, and I'm about into this place where I'm meeting up. So I love you guys and leave you. Thank you very much once again for listening. Thank you for being here. Hope you guys are out flinging some arrows and getting some critters on the deck. It's my wish for all of you guys during the rut and the raw. And if you're not getting that chance, then I hope your next hunt, no matter what it is highly successful. Much love. We'll talk soon. See you.
That wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us, team. If you did have any topics, questions, or you wanted to suggest a guest for Becoming a Bowhunter, you can send me an email at matty@becomingabowhunter.com. If you are enjoying the show, or you've enjoyed in particular episodes, please do me a solid and share it around with your friends. If you are not already, please hit the subscribe button, as the more subscribers we get, the higher the podcast gets ranked, and that definitely helps out for showing it to other individuals. If you are not already following me on Instagram, it's at becomingabowhunter.podcast, and on YouTube, it's Becoming a Bowhunter. Get out, team, fling some arrows, get that practice in, and walk those yards in the paddocks until you find those critters. That is it for now, but not the last time that you'll hear from Becoming a Bowhunter.